right, Darren, we are live. Good afternoon, folks. Thanks so much for joining. We're going to get started here in just a little bit. Give folks some time to just filter in, and we'll kick it off here shortly. Thank you. Alrighty, Darren, I think we could probably go ahead and get started. So folks, again, thank you guys so much for the time today. Obviously the purpose of our conversation here is solely really related to secure networking and Wi-Fi 7 with Cisco Meraki. If there's any questions that come up during the conversation, please feel free to enter them into the chat. We do have ample time at the end of the conversation for Q&A, and so we'll certainly address those as they come up. Just to kind of kick us off, let's level set with an agenda. So we'll start with a brief round of introductions. From there, we'll move into really more of the high-level technical discussion, addressing Wi-Fi 7, secure networking, and everybody's favorite topic in 2025, AI. Darren, just to do a quick mic check, can you hear me loud and clear?
I can hear you fine, Andy.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's get started then. So introductions, just so you folks know who it is you're talking to. My name is Andy Hogan. I'm a business development manager with Netrix Global. Been with the company for just over 2 years. And whereas the company is headquartered in Chicago, I'm remotely located in Rochester, New York. I have my colleague from the Cisco side of the house, Darren Douglas, on the call as well. Darren, if you want to just give a brief introduction to yourself, sir.
Yep, I'm Darren Douglas, and my photo looks like it's a little bit out of date. I've grown the beard a couple of weeks from now. But I'm a solutions engineer now. We changed our titles a couple quarters ago at Cisco, but focused on Cisco networking, mostly on the wireless side, but experienced with a bunch of Cisco technologies over the last 20 plus years here.
Great. Thank you, Darren. So, just again, before we move into Darren's presentation and demo, just to give folks on the call who may not understand, who Netrix is, how we interact with Cisco, just provide a little background here. So like I mentioned, we are headquartered in Chicago and have been since 1989, which coincidentally is when we first partnered with Cisco in the hosted communication space. We are an IT consultancy, MSP and MSSP that services 1,500 organizations globally. In that 30-year time period, we've grown exponentially. We're up to about 700 employees. And I think it's important to call out that last figure on the slide. 78% of our team is strictly just our engineering bench alone, which I really do think paints the picture that we really do aim to be a holistic IT partner to our clients. And I think the next few slides show how we deliver that promise. So what you're seeing here, this is really sort of the 3 pillars that we operate under, right? So advise, you can think of as a discovery engagement. Deploy is really our professional services team, all the way up to that run, that full-on managed services arm of our organization. And we can incorporate these 3 pillars into every solution area that we deliver on. So when we talk about advise or discovery, right, this is where we're working with your team to identify any potential gaps, be it in your cybersecurity posture, your cloud infrastructure, or your collaboration configuration. We can provide a roadmap with recommendations and remediations. And at the end of the day, if you have the bandwidth in-house to implement those changes, we've done our job. If not, though, that's where we can come in at the deploy phase, where we are that professional services arm working with your team collaboratively to strengthen a specific focus area. And we can scale that all the way up to a full-on managed services, be it, again, in your cloud environment, being your dedicated SOC, or within our telephony practice. Ultimately, our goal in that space is to give you industry-leading service while saving you a little time and money. Just to address our Cisco partnership, right? So as I mentioned, we've been partnered with Cisco since Netrix's inception in 1989. However, for the past 20 years, we've achieved and maintained a Cisco Gold partnership status, which is really no easy feat. So both as a gold integrator in the professional services space, having completed numerous projects related to Cisco network infrastructure, data center projects, security, unified communications, but also as a gold solutions provider. So from a managed service perspective, this is where we're actually running and maintaining our client Cisco infrastructure, security, and collaboration practices. I think it's important to call out that we have CCIE certified engineers on staff in both a professional and managed services capacity. And particularly in that managed service space, that's on a 24/7 by 365 basis, right? Providing you the absolute pinnacle of Cisco support as an MSSP. And Darren, I think you could agree with me, that's probably something that makes Netrix unique within the MSP marketplace.
It certainly is. Yep. A lot of focus on managed services these days at Cisco and elsewhere. So appreciate Netrix's work in that area.
Yeah. Yeah. And lastly, I think it's just important to call out, we're not agnostic, right, in this space. We work with clients of all different shapes and sizes, all the folks down from 50 employees all the way up to folks at 50,000 employees and across all verticals as well. So without any further ado, I do want to just jump in right to the meat of the conversation here. Darren, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Very good. Oh, thank you, Andy, and thanks for the opportunity, Netrix. But really the topic today is about network modernization, and specifically we're really talking about, as Andy showed on the intro slide there, Wi-Fi 7, but really access networking, meaning, kind of the periphery of the network. But the, question really comes up quite a bit is, what is the context of this change, or why am I making a change? A lot of times in networking, we go from 10 meg to 100 meg to gig to 40 gig, et cetera, or in the Wi-Fi world, we'll talk about the speeds there. But what's the driver for it, right? So AI is the buzzword, right? I think most folks, and depending on what rock you've been under lately, you may not have heard it, but obviously a ton of focus on AI. And for access networking, right, we're not talking about where the AI learning models are housed or where our data is housed. We're talking about really where the consumers of that AI data is and where some of that AI data really specific to user behaviors, application behaviors, and network access behaviors. That's AI.
I'm so sorry to stop you. I think we're just having some audio issues on your end, sir. Maybe just take a quick pause to try to address that.
Yep, I will take a look, Andy. Test 1, 2.
That is good on my end. I have some boots on the ground if they want to give me some quick feedback as well. Let's see. Sounds like it's getting better. So Darren, I apologize. Please continue.
No worries. Apologize for the hassles. If there's a Netrix doctor in the house on the collab side, I'm happy to go in for an exam. But obviously a big transformation, right? Really for how we are operating on a day-to-day behavior, regardless of what my function is, if I'm an HR person, if I'm an engineer, if I'm a salesperson, etc. There's all of those functions are being transformed, right? And so it's really the responsible for us in IT to make that transformation as easy as possible, right? And so when we talk about the access network, really that transformation is, how do I make it easier to quantify the performance of the network and to minimize disruptions for how that AI data is either being collected or is being delivered to those end users, right? So what we are doing at Cisco is, once again, today we're mostly talking about the workplace, meaning the user edge of the network, so to speak. But obviously Cisco is doing a ton of work with respect to AI-ready data centers. It's out of the scope of and it's really out of my realm of expertise. Workplaces is really where we are focused on, once again, the security, application performance, and just the basic access networking, and really the telemetry that comes out of all of those pieces of the workplace, right? And no matter if that workplace is somebody's home office, or if it's a branch network, a retail store, campus, etc., all of those workplaces are what we are doing more digitization of, and we're collecting data from. And then the digital resilience, as the little graphic shows, it's resilient in a sense of either, regardless of what part of the network we're talking about, the resilience is really the ability to have uniform and consistent connectivity and the instrumentation to be able to make sure that that traffic is flowing accurately and securely. You can really think about digital resilience You've probably seen some of the Cisco marketing around the self-driving network. You can kind of think about it as an autonomous driving analogy, right? But digital resilience really is what the buzzword is implying there, is that we're providing the hooks to collect the network performance and then be able to feed those hooks into how the network is configured and to be resilient for changes or performance impacts or et cetera, right? So that's really the big pillars of where we're focused on network transformation. And when we move into the more specifics of today's discussion, specifically Wi-Fi 7 and access transformation, a lot of folks say, what are we really doing for transforming workplaces, right? For RTO, return to office, right? Cisco's byline for this is make the office a magnet, not a mandate, right? So provide a carrot to get folks into the office, not a stick to get them into the office, right? So really what we're doing, a lot of that is on the collaboration side of things, but from a networking perspective, right? You have to have a network that connects to those telephony devices. I need a network to collect my phone to the network and derive performance data out of the network for how that device is performing, right? So that's really the building block for it. And then when we talk about AI-ready wireless, really there's more data, more applications coming through the network, and they're more mission critical, right? So, a lot of folks think about, I'm just teleworking, I'm coming in from a video connection in my remote office, et cetera, but that traffic has to go somewhere, right? So there's more video consumers at a remote perspective, there's more video being consumed at the headquarters perspective as well. And then as I mentioned earlier, growth and resilience, right? So really this is about creating, data points, to quantify how that network is performing, how the applications on that network are performing. And then in the wireless space, how users are using that network and that facility, right? As I'm sure everybody on the call is aware, real estate is significantly different post-pandemic. So really the infrastructure, the network infrastructure gets us data to be able to quantify, is my office space being effectively used? So the new Cisco Wi-Fi 7 access points, these are about 2 months old now. Really, they are obviously, they're faster. So as with all Wi-Fi 7 iterations, right, a lot of it is about, and the headline says, how fast can it move data across, right? Can it move 10 gig, 5 gig, etc. These obviously are faster access points, but kind of the under the surface thing is, how are the access points able to deliver that workplace experience effectively, right? So we want to provide efficient traffic on and off the network, and really it has to be resilient is the good buzzword there to apply to this. These do also have what's called unified licensing, so we're mostly here to talk about cloud connectivity today, but they're also adaptable to use on-prem. They do have a lot of the location data. That's what the spaces is, we'll talk about a little bit. And they're also a uniform global use access point now. So very, very flexible devices, as well as from a network performance perspective, and very, very flexible from a deployment perspective. And we'll talk about some of the technical specs here in a slide or two. So why is Wi-Fi 7 impactful? So this is an example from education. For example, 41% of students are using more devices, right? We've seen that in education as well as other spaces. Digital learning, that's really the applications, right? So once again, post-pandemic, and really before that with cloud transformation, a ton of diverse applications being consumed from a ton of different places, right? And so 75% of teachers are believing that those digital resources are going to replace physical resources, which they probably have gone a long ways towards that 75% already, and then better engagement, right? And so, in the old days, it was kind of easy to, my applications maybe, lived in the data center or the network closet in my facility. Now those applications are typically across a WAN link, hosted in the cloud, hosted in mini clouds, right? And so really that instrumentation to tell me how those connections are working is really the important piece now. And then obviously we hear a lot about virtual reality, augmented reality implications, right? And so that, in addition to all the video tools that we're getting accustomed to using on a daily basis, and then just the load of users on the network are really what creates kind of a challenge for networks. So Wi-Fi 7 use cases, I'll talk about some of the technical details here, but once again, a lot of the wireless upgrades centers on speeds and feeds, so to speak, right? How fast are the radios? How many streams do they support? How fast is the Ethernet uplink port? That obviously helps us move high-density video, multi-users on video or augmented reality, etc. But the piece that's a little bit maybe under the surface is things like that are latency sensitive, right? So for communication services, IoT devices that may require a very, very fast response time, and then things like gaming or immersive learning. I think gaming is, we don't think about that in terms of a work function, but obviously with the gamification of a lot of apps and with a lot of apps being very interactive in nature, there's obviously an expectation that the response time on the network, right? And so wireless has traditionally been very latency unfriendly, I'll say. But with these higher speed networks, we're able to move traffic on and off the network very fast, improving that user experience. So to get into some of the details of Wi-Fi 7, I won't go into a lot of detail here. We got a pretty brief call today, but a wider channel, more density in each one of those channels. So that 4K QAM or quadrature modulation is basically a denser amount of traffic in each of those bandwidth slices. And then MLO or multi-link operation effectively lets us put multiple data streams within that channel, right? Where, in the old days, it was just one stream of data in that single channel. MLO allows us to put multiple streams across multiple channels. The other features there, security, multi-RU, block ACK, preamble puncturing, those are really enhancements to the 802.11 protocol that allow for more efficient use of channel resources. Like I said, I won't go into all the details here, but suffice it to say that Wi-Fi 7 standardizes a lot of these, previously kind of, bleeding edge features that are now standardized, and they allow not only a faster speed access to the channel, but also a less latent access to the channel. So as I mentioned, the 9176 and the 78 have been available from Cisco for about 2 months now. The 76, as noted there, we refer to as a tri-radio, which is a 2.4, a 5 gig, and a 6 gig, which are their 3 radios. And the 78 is a quad radio, which actually has 2 5 gig radios. So, especially if you don't have a lot of 6 gigahertz clients yet, that extra 5 gigahertz radio gives you a little bit of flexibility there. UWB, or ultra wideband, is a new location technology I'll talk about in a couple slides. And GNSS is your GPS global navigation satellite service for mostly for coordination of the regulatory domain and APs, as well as for location of that AP on maps. And then we do have 10 gig uplink ports, so as the radio becomes faster, the uplink to the network needs to become faster as well. Obviously, these are backwards compatible to slower speed copper ports going back to 100 meg uplink compatible, but as your wireless traffic expands, you also want your uplink to expand as well. And Cisco Spaces, or specifically Smart Spaces. So if you're not familiar, Cisco Spaces is effectively, as the name implies, a location context tool that provides as it says there in the second bullet there, a software platform to turn your buildings or your facility into a smart space. So you've got, the context of users in a space, as well as, how that space is being utilized. It can tie into your collaboration solutions so that end users have the ability to reserve a conference room, etc. And well as the third bullet there, outcomes. So typically we're talking about outcomes such as, indoor wayfinding. So if I want to locate a conference room, determine if it's utilized or not, and provide all that data to the folks that are managing the network, that's what we can allow with these access points that are effectively, they're data collectors on the network about user and application performance, and then relaying that into my building utilization information. And then UWB, or ultra wideband, is pretty new technology. It is a supplement. So we've used Wi-Fi as well as BLE, or Bluetooth Low Energy, for some time, but ultra wideband is a new capability that gives us and it's up in the 7 gigahertz spectrum, and it uses a wide bandwidth up there, which gives us higher accuracy location as well as more battery efficient use. So if I want to, put a asset tag on a high value piece of equipment, these APs can hear that asset tag, and that asset tag can stay alive longer with a higher battery life, right? Because it's such a brief piece of polling information that ultra wideband is sending out, right? So this is an exciting innovation. I think we're doing a lot with some of the handheld vendors, as well as being able to also provide, your wayfinding indoors the same way that you would outdoors using, your traditional GPS location. So I'll show a quick demo here of some of the Wi-Fi 7 stuff, and Andy, tell me if my share does not work. Hopefully this is coming across okay.
Yep, we got the clients page, Darren.
Perfect. Thanks very much. So if you haven't seen Meraki dashboard in a while, and we're showing Meraki, this is also, as I said, a solution that we offer on-prem as well. But this is obviously showing, for those of you who are familiar with Meraki, this is kind of a rebranded or readjusted user interface for your client summary, right? So we're seeing at the top, uplinks from the network, as well as your WAN or MX appliances, switches, and access points. We're mostly talking about access points here today. And I happen to know, and one thing I'll point out here, we've obviously got a collection of many access points in this network, but I'll highlight real quickly, we've got some that are 802.11be capable. And for those of you who follow IEEE and standards, you'll know that BE is the new Wi-Fi 7 access points, right? So we do have a couple of the Samsung clients on here, and specifically the S24 is the one that's kind of interesting on this network. Of course, it's going to make me log in because I haven't logged in a while. Hopefully it logs me in pretty quickly. But specifically, this is going to show this specific client device on the network, and it is 802.11be connected, I promise. And it is going to show multi-link operation. Okay, so the interesting part of that is that it's actually using two connections for this specific client. Let me see if I can maybe stop sharing.
And Darren, I'm letting you know I am here. I just in terms of the network and the mic, I figure it may be best if I stay on.
Okay. Thanks, Andy. Yep. Let's see if I can call up another share screen. We're seeing overview tab, Andy.
Yes, sir. And Darren, just while we're taking a brief pause,
Yep.
I don't know if there's maybe anything you can do on your end with the settings feature at the top related to the audio type. Just getting, again, some feedback that it's kind of going in and out, a little echoey at times. And just Darren, while you're taking a look at that, folks who are here, again, I posted a brief announcement, but would love some additional questions in the chat. So far, we've just really gotten some stuff related more to the presentation itself, but any specific questions you folks have for us, now's the time to ask. Darren, back to you.
All right, thanks, Andy. So this is the specific client I was talking about here, Samsung S24, and just a couple of things to highlight real quickly here. You can see right about a third of the way down the screen here, a link 0 signal, a link 1 signal. That's showing two connections, a 2.4 gig radio and a 6 gig radio being used simultaneously by this one client device, right? And you can see the respective signal information about that. And it is connected to a specific access point, and that is this AP34. If I click on this AP34, which will come up in another tab, and we can look at that specific access point. It's a little pokey today on the Cisco wireless network out there in California, but you can see here that we've got AP34 IDF. This is out in our San Francisco office, and you can see here the Wi-Fi 7 clients in this current client, 3 clients currently connected to this. And if we call up this S24, under details here, you'll see that it is simultaneously connected to both a 2.4 gig radio and a 6 gigahertz radio, just this one client. So that provides me obviously 2 data paths to send that data, and also provides me resilience across those 2 different data paths, right? So that's really one of the, I think, most innovative features that we have in Wi-Fi 7 or 802.11be, but it's providing us once again that additional speed as well as more resilience across the network. So just wanted to highlight that, and don't have a lot of time to go into details here, but obviously you've got your traditional Meraki capabilities there as far as being able to diagnose the connectivity, all of your uplink statistics, application performance, all of those things as well. Okay.
So the question we did get is, are these items we're covering actually available for purchase through Cisco today?
They are, yes. We actually have the 76 and the 78 available as of, I believe, approximately mid-November. So yes, they have been available for a couple months now. So as I mentioned, uplinks, right? So we've got actually 10 gig uplinks on these, and a little bit of a slide build here. But for folks that have been around wireless for a while, know that we started with 11 megabits per second back when 802.11b was first a thing, right? And those speeds have obviously consistently gone up, right? And so what we're seeing a lot now in Wi-Fi 7 is from both a data link perspective, right? I've mostly been talking about data connectivity, but there's also a power connectivity, right? So we typically power the APs via PoE. Actually, these specific new Cisco APs, the 76 and the 78, do not have a DC power capability. They're PoE only. They do require, they can use, I'll say, approximately 50 watts on PoE. So they do have, as noted there, either a tri or a quad radio. So you've got multiple radios, USB, etc. So it is possible, in order to use all of the capabilities at full power on the APs, up to that 50 watt level. So we're seeing, some folks opt to go for the higher capacity M-gig or multi-gigabit Ethernet switches, as well as those switches can provide as much as 90 watts of PoE power. Obviously, we're not using all 90 watts for these APs, and we have done quite a bit of work on the APs. If folks aren't upgrading their switching infrastructure, as I mentioned, they can obviously use a lower speed uplink Ethernet port, and they can also function off of 30 watts or AT PoE power as well. They just don't offer full capabilities, right? And so instead of using your USB is disabled at 30 watts, you've only got the capability of, say, using 2 data streams instead of 4 data streams on your radios, etc. But from a investment perspective, we're seeing a lot of folks opt to go to the higher data speeds as well as the higher power PoE ports for these access points. And then also on the power of the switches themselves, right? And so not just for AP perspective, but also for other perspectives when we're powering, say, virtual desktop interfaces, or if we're powering up collaboration equipment or video terminals. A lot of those devices, cameras, right? A lot of devices are consuming 30, 60, perhaps even 90 watts. 90 watts is pretty rare, but pay and tell zoom cameras and other things can consume those higher levels of power. And then we also have the capability with features like stack power in the Cisco Catalyst switches. We're also expanding that into, we don't have stack power as yet with the Meraki switches, but we are including new power capabilities such as fast and perpetual PoE in some of the Meraki MS switches to give us more flexibility. Obviously, with stack power, what we're doing is we're allowing for the power supplies to contribute to the overall power capabilities of the stack, as the name implies, so we can distribute that power load across all of the ports, providing us resilience as well as effective power sharing. So real quick, we do have a new 150. This is not out yet, but as it will be out within the next couple of weeks. Our fiscal year is ending in end of January. So this Q3 of fiscal 25 means starting in February, but this is a new Meraki NS. This will be kind of slotted between the 130 and the 210, 225s, etc. But this will offer that 60 watt power over Ethernet, M-Gig capabilities, 10 gig SFP uplinks, right? And as I mentioned, we are doing additional software features such as adaptive policy, perpetual PoE on these as well. So we really think that this 150 will be a great match for the Wi-Fi 7 APs to provide those faster uplinks as well as higher power. Okay, so let me move into the other kind of software-centric piece of networking, right? And so when we have more stuff on the network, you need to think about, there's different data traffic going across that network, right? So a lot of times where security is important in networking is, to keep, folks that are perhaps on their phone on a guest network from interfering with other users on the network, right? So segmentation, as the name implies, segments that traffic from different users and different areas and different applications across the network to keep those traffic flows secure. So the challenge with secure networking has always been, how do I roll it out, right? And so what we really want to do, the holy grail of secure networking, is to allow for simplicity of operation, right? And so if I access the network as a guest, or if I'm accessing a type of application that I shouldn't have access to on a guest, I don't necessarily want to put in a explicit configuration to restrict that. I would like that to automatically recognize my device as a guest device and put me in the proper segment of the network, right? So that's really what secure networking does. It identifies devices, users, and applications and segments that stuff automatically, right? And so obviously that gives us the ability to have the correct users with the correct access credentials to access those applications and keep the people who don't, or users who don't, off of those pieces of the network, right? So adaptive policy is really Meraki's implementation of that. There are obviously other ways to segment a network with Meraki, but adaptive policy is the automated way to do it. And that is effectively, as noted there, an organization intent-based policy that uses what we refer to as security group tags, which we also use across other Cisco technologies. And really the magic is those traffic flows are shared across all pieces of the data plane. So as the little graphic shows, whether I'm on a phone or I'm a laptop connected to the access point, as I go into the switch, as well as my MX appliance, that data flows and is segmented at each point in the network. And when it gets to the other point in the network, I've got that data kind of in a tunnel. So it only goes where that tunnel says that it can go from an intent-based perspective, right? And so this really is a self-driving security implementation. And the intent is, this is showing just a graphic of our identity services engine. which can be used with adaptive policy. Adaptive policy can actually be implemented just in Meraki dashboard itself, but really the beauty of doing it from a security identity store such as ISE, or Identity Services Engine, is that that identity can be distributed to all pieces of the network, whether that's the Meraki piece going into your data center. If there's potentially other, security cloud access controls being employed, ISE can tell you, as the probably kind of tough to tell in the BrightTalk interface here, but effectively it's saying, HR users are supposed to talk to HR servers, and employees are supposed to talk to employee resources, and malware is not supposed to talk to other employees, right? And so that's what that, once again, probably doesn't show up too well, but effectively that's saying I want to deny all of those potential ports that are known to be malware, but ISE gives you a visualization and it automatically distributes that out with you not actually having to put in an ACL that's detailed about what applications can talk to what users or what destinations. So as mentioned, we've got ways to solve this innovation via things like access list and other, segmentation solutions. But really the magic is to be able to, avoid this manual or static lookup via classifying that traffic and then applying it to both my users as well as noted there, the cloud workloads, right? And so I've got an automated way, and we are referring to that now as common policy, right? And so this is relatively new in Cisco world as far as, from a nomenclature. We haven't been calling it common policy except for maybe the last year or so, but we've really been doing common policy for quite some time. And once again, the golden outcome of this is intended to be, no matter what I'm accessing the network with, no matter what network equipment is touching that traffic, I've got a common policy to enforce that traffic. Okay, so obviously it enables me, whether I'm accessing from a campus, branch, or a remote site, whether that's via WAN or LAN equipment, and then whatever my destinations happen to be, right? I've got a consistent way to enforce that traffic as it goes across the network, right? So that context is built into local domain. I can share that context out, and I'm enforcing that securely, basically at every hop in the network. Okay, so I'll move into, a lot of times assurance and security really get interspersed. And the reason for that is that it's important from a security perspective to know, where is my traffic originating? What is the traffic? What device is it originating from? And then assurance also is, and typically when we say assurance, we're talking about application performance, the actual throughput, behaviors. Do I have too much latency? Et cetera, right? And so really security and assurance go hand in hand. You have to really know what is going across your network before you can assure it, right? And before you can secure it as well. So assurance is kind of a fancy word for, what we've done in IT for a long, long time, which is, being aware of problems on the network, is it port down? Am I having interference in a wireless environment, et cetera? But what really the new part is the proactive and automated operations to allow us to look at basically a consolidated point of how the network's performing and then correlating that with the application behaviors as well. So, I might have gone too many slides there, but obviously visibility and control is shrinking because your traffic is coming from a lot of different places, right? And so we're no longer talking about a data center, we're talking about the cloud. We're not talking about just the application stack that I control. We're talking about software as a service and API access to things, so et cetera, right? And so external dependencies are growing, and it's increasingly difficult to pin down, where is my traffic being impacted? I only had to, in the old days, look at a couple of different places that I might be having network impacts, but now it can come from a variety of different places, right? And so what we're doing is really, obviously, you have to monitor, as I mentioned. So on the right, we're baselining the network operation. monitoring both the application perspective as well as the network perspective, and then hopefully we're able to localize those problems and diagnose them quickly, right? And so we refer to that as network insights or root cause analysis of where the problems are popping up, and then from that we want to move around the circle to the mitigate and remediate, right? So I want to recommend how I can correct those problems, and also on the proactive piece, right? Once I've collected that data and mitigated it, I can then, the next time it pops up, I've got a trend, I've got history, and then I can predict and optimize for those problems in the future. So this is an example that we've, and this is relatively recent in Dashboard, but we have this on-prem in some of our implementations as well, but we are collecting what we call application telemetry via our Thousand Eyes integration with Meraki, and we're able to look at your application performance. If it's something as simple as availability, you can see the little timeline there that's showing when I had application outage, the response time from those applications. And then I can also correlate that to my network connectivity as well. So as it says there, Meraki Wi-Fi and LAN telemetry is, we're effectively feeding the network information stuff up to Thousand Eyes, and we're taking the Thousand Eyes data down into Meraki, and we're matching those to contextual performance measurements and determining where we've got good performance and where we've got impacted performance, right? So the idea is obviously to assure those digital experiences and to create less gaps, right? So we want to minimize those gaps in visibility, and we want to, wherever possible, create those automated recommendations and to streamline, what we're doing on a day-to-day as, far as determining connectivity problems, application performance, etc. So let me see if I can call this up real quick at the risk of my Meraki dashboard fighting me once again. But if I call up, we'll go back to this dashboard, and if I go over here to assurance overview, so once again, for you, those of you who are familiar with a dashboard, you may be familiar with some of these views, but this is a consolidated view that's relatively new. So I get, and this is a little bit boring because things are going pretty well out in California for this particular network. You can see I can call up various times of the day, but this is really where we're providing that aggregated health, right? And so you can see here that there's not a whole lot of bad performance over the last day or week or 2 hours, but you can see there are situations here where we've had minimal degradation in some of these areas of the network, but this is providing me effectively, as you can see here, wireless, wired, potentially remote access impact, as well as my network performance across my access points, switches, and WAN appliances. And then down here at the bottom is really the newest piece, right? And so those of you familiar with Meraki dashboard may have seen assurance and performance views before, but the new part here really is the ability to look at this application correlation, right? So if I look down here, you can see that I've got 15 total apps, and the one here at the top that's most impacted is O365. So I'm sure lots of folks are familiar with Office 365 and may have seen challenges before, but if I call up my Office 365, you can see that it's correlating basically 365 operation across internet and then application, right? So that's saying, from our assessment of both the network and the application into things, I can see there's slightly different impact, right? So I can say that there are 369 clients impacted over the time window there. I can basically graph that out, right? So from a network performance perspective, I can pick out where that packet loss has been most impacted, and I can timestamp those impacts. From a loss latency perspective, so looking purely at the network statistics of that application. And then from an application perspective, I can call that up as well, right? So these, from this perspective, I can say, well, there's a much smaller population of clients that are being impacted, right? And so I can tell this from my active diagnosis that I can see that the application impact, then I can click down and call up additional details here. It usually takes a couple of seconds for this to call up, but effectively this lets me drill down on, what is the source of these application problems. I can diagnose those problems, as well as I can diagnose it from a network perspective, so I'm able to quickly isolate. I don't need to track everything down on the application side, nor track everything down on the network side of things. I'm able to quickly drill in and find where those problems are popping up. Okay. So with that, see if I could call up the application for packet loss here. Effectively, this is a new integration, mostly tied into the MX appliances, but obviously, as I'm sure a lot of folks are aware, we've been looking at application performance across Meraki networking for quite some time, and we continue to have that. For example, here at the network-wide view, right, we've got the ability to call up the overall network application performance, which shows up in kind of our traditional UI here, right, and I can call up those application details as well. Okay, so I think those are the most important demos I wanted to show today, and I think that wraps us up pretty much with the slides. Andy, was there anything that I missed in Q&A or otherwise?
Nope, Darren, I just want to say thank you again for your expertise. Folks, we don't have any current questions in the chat, but Darren and I will be around for maybe just another 5 minutes or so in case those questions do come up. For everything else, though, I do just want to direct us, and bear with me, I got a lot of slides to go back here. It turns out I can do this a lot easier. Give me 1 second. I just want to provide our contact information on the screen here as well. If any questions come up in the future, or if there's something directly that you may need support on, please feel free to reach out to either Darren or myself. And we'd be glad to assist you in whatever capacity that may look like. So again, Darren, thank you. Folks who joined the call today, thank you so much. We'll stick around for maybe just another minute or so should questions filter into the chat. But again, appreciate everybody's time.
Indeed. Thank you very much, folks. And thank you, Andy.
You're welcome, Darren. And for the record, I like the beard.
Well, I'm not thinking it's supposed to make me look distinguished and hopefully smarter, but I think I looked a little younger in the old days. But yeah,
well, like I told you, we had just gotten our professional headshots done, so I'm very much hoping to replace my grainy attempt at a beard from about 5 to 7 years ago, but headshots are still inbound. So again, folks, just pausing for another minute or so here. If there's no questions coming into the chat, we'll certainly wrap up. We do have one coming in as well. Darren, I'm going to direct this to you. So what is the expected lifetime of these wireless APs?
That's a great question. Typically we see at least 5 years, I'll say, as far as, our published end of support, right? And so I think recently, trying to think of the last access point we've announced end of sale on. I think they're the 18, 20, 3800 access points, and I think those are slated to actually go end of support in, I think, 2027, but they'll actually be end of sale in 2026. So I think those were introduced back in 2016, right? And so somewhere in that kind of a time frame, to be honest, we typically see the technology, the 802.11 standard, go a little bit faster than our lifespan of our access points. But I would say 5 to 7 years is a pretty good rule of thumb.
Great. Thank you, Darren.
You bet.
And thank you for the question. We'll stick around just another minute or so here if any other questions filter through. Maybe just another 30 seconds, folks, on the questions. Alrighty. Well, I think we're good to wrap it up. If anybody is still on the call, you can access this on demand through the Bright Talk portal at any point in time. So please feel free to reach out to us if you need any assistance there as well. We do have a backlog of content on there as well, related to all things Netrix, our partnerships, Cisco related as well, of course. But again, folks, thank you for the time. Darren, thank you. Such a pleasure to work with you, sir.
Well, you as well, Andy. Thanks to Netrix, and thanks, folks, for joining up today.
And Darren, I'm sorry, we do have one more. Is the best implementation with the 10 gigabyte Catalyst backbone switches?
That's really our preferred deployment, and I'll be honest, we're not going to see that entire 10 gig of uplink. Typically, it's going to be closer to, and the reason really we went from 5 to 10 is just because there's not a step in between, right? You go from 2.5 to 5 to 10, right? And so practically speaking, 10 gig gives you the best headroom, so to speak. But 2.5 gig or 5 gig M-gig uplinks will suffice with these until you get to a higher client load. Once you get to a certain client load, you may be possible to push above that 5 gigabit uplink to a 10 gig uplink. So it's really kind of a headroom or investment protection strategy more than a, day one, you have to have it perspective, if that helps out.
So Mark, that helps. As resolved, yeah. And Darren, maybe just another 30 seconds to see if there's any sort of follow-up question on top of that.
Sure. And I will say real quick as a teaser, I'd say stay tuned within the next month or so. I do expect us to have some news on kind of some lower end of these Wi-Fi 7 access points as well. The 76 and 78 are kind of our flagship, but I do expect us to be filling in some of the lower end of the portfolio as well within the next month or so. So stay tuned.
Awesome. Darren, I think that's all we got. Again, thank you so much, man. It's such a pleasure to work with you. And thanks, everybody, for joining today as well.
You bet, Andy. Great to work with you as well.
Take care, everybody. Thanks.
Thanks, folks.